So I would like to welcome today, for the third time round, my son Sam. He helped me to launch this podcast way back last year, and we did the first two episodes together. And the feedback has been great. People have really, really enjoyed listening to you, listening to your your insights and your introflection.
Well, I'm an incredibly interesting man.
So it seems. And being the only male on my show,
Has it been only me so far?
You're the only male, so I'm having to recycle here.
Cool.
But it's lovely to have you back.
I got lots of problems as well, so, take your pick.
Anyway, welcome back to the show, Sammy.
Thank you, Mum. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So today we are going to have a look at perfectionism. As you're learning about your relationship with yourself, you seem to be in a part of your life where you're diving deep, and there's a lot of changes going on for you. So I thought your relationship with perfectionism would be a very interesting topic today for us to reflect on and break down, because I know in your work right now in social media, you're on a real campaign to help other professionals in social media to break down those barriers of perfectionism, to be able to just go with the flow and get it out there. And it's been really interesting watching you through your social media journey, how you are breaking that down in yourself and chilling out more and learning so much about yourself on the way. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think for the context for the listener, so I started social media, taking it seriously about 5 weeks ago, and I decided to start this campaign of 50,000 followers in 50 days, which was a pretty ridiculous goal for someone who, first of all, wasn't particularly good at social media at the time, and only had about 400 followers. So what this goal turned into was less about the followers and more about the consistency of overriding perfectionist thoughts of things having to be perfect. Because if you're uploading every day, you just can't make it perfect. You have to just go, this will do. Which was really challenging because those of you who heard the last podcast, and if you hadn't heard the last podcast, I've been a musician my entire life, and I think perfectionism hugely held me back in that respect, because I had lots of self-doubts and imposter syndrome and things like that with my music and with my voice specifically. And so the perfectionist in me was just too strong to allow myself to make mistakes in order to improve. And I think now, some years later, I'm now at the point where I have accepted that the mistake part is the most important part of progress and of, just getting something started. And I think without accepting that, with, going into something with the intention of this has to be perfect, and or it's not worthy of being in the world, is it's just not a viable way to start and create anything.
So what started out as a way to try and influence others on this social media journey, it looks like it's turning out into a journey of self-reflection here, and this is actually about you helping yourself to break down your belief systems about perfectionism.
Sure, it was weird how the kind of goalposts of the challenge changed from being target driven of like, let's reach this amount of followers in this amount of time, which, let's be honest, was never going to happen. But it was the intention of setting that challenge that I would stick to it, and that kind of migrated into this almost like therapeutic ritual of going, okay, I know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about authenticity on social media and overriding perfectionism, because I think that is why so many people who might want to start doing social media are holding themselves back, because they're just too afraid of getting it wrong, it not being perfect, or the judgment. And I think that's that's the kicker with creatives, is there's such a fear of judgment of what you've created going out into the world and being judged. But the reality is that no one actually cares.
Yeah.
You are the only one who cares. And especially when you don't have an audience, when there's no real eyes on you yet, you have that freedom to just do what you want. It's taken me a really long time to realize that it's and it took so long because it was never about really other people. It was always my own judgment of myself. And that's, if I put something out and I wasn't happy with it, I'd be like, I'm not good enough. And that would feed into the narrative of the perfectionism, and it would snowball, and you'd ruminate, and then all of a sudden you're on the floor thinking, I'm not ever going to be good at anything.
So what you're learning is perfectionism is self-imposed goals, rather than with the fear that if I'm not perfect, then the world will see me differently.
Yeah.
And also, this is about me. This is about, as you said, people don't really care.
Mm.
What you're wearing, what you look like, whether you're putting out every day. It's that internal pressure that's the driver.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It's some people don't, they I think everyone has it to some degree, but some people are much better at making mistakes. I had this in living in Spain as well, learning the language. I learned a very good amount of Spanish, and I can hold a conversation in Spanish, but considering I was there for almost 2 years, I should be fluent. And I mean, it wasn't Marbella, so like there's no real need to speak Spanish down there. But
Spanglish.
yeah, but I notice it when I try and speak Spanish. I'm so afraid of making mistakes, even though it's not, there's no need to feel like that. It just doesn't matter. If you make a mistake, it's not, they don't look at you and think, oh God, like what you're doing, you look like a fool. It's only you that thinks, oh God, that was so embarrassing.
When they speak to us and in English and their grammar's not perfect, then you just think, well, that's just the way they say it. We're not breaking it down that, oh, they got that wrong, they're rubbish.
Yeah, like you understood the point, so you don't think like that, do you? But no, but it's just that internal dialogue in your head that just says, don't attempt this because you might get it wrong. And then that's the problem, because it holds so many people back from doing anything that they want to do. And I was having a conversation with my dad the other day about my work and what I do, and how it's very different to what my dad would do, although he's very supportive of me, and he doesn't think that I should get a real job, a 9-to-5 office job, because he knows that would make me really unhappy. But we spoke about how many people do these sorts of jobs and are so unhappy because they are just too afraid of making that leap, because they think they're going to get it wrong, or they think it's not safe. So I think wherever you are and whatever you're doing, unless you really love what you do and you're truly fearless, and that's the bravery, isn't it? I think it's so brave, people who can cook with freedom, with to be completely experimental and expressive of themselves in their cooking, or in music, in writing, in whatever. The pioneers of anything are the people who are fearless, and they don't worry about that outcome. They just go, I'm just going to try this and see what happens.
So where do you think that comes from then, that freedom to just explore the craft?
I think well, a lot of people are just more expressive than others, aren't they? I think you see some people who the way they hold themselves, and the clothes they wear and things like that, you look at them and you think, like, you are just being yourself. You're expressing every part of you because you do not care what the world thinks of you. And I really admire those sorts of people, because it's not conforming, and it's I think it's just truly authentic. And I think that is the goal to aim towards. But I think as a lot of it stems from childhood, I think, why we feel this, and why some people have that ability and some people less so. For example, as a child, I was quite an anxious child, and you and me would be focusing on music, because I'm sure the listeners know you had a passion, still do have a passion for music, and I got that from you, and that became our thing. We would do music together, and it would be quite intense at times, but I always kind of figured that my perfectionism must have come from that. And I don't necessarily think that was true, because recently I spent some time with my dad here in London, and he helped me with my garden, because he loves gardening and he wanted to help out. And I just noticed that there's so many behaviors of him, spending a bit of extended time with him. I'm like, that's where I get that from. That's where I feel like I can't make mistakes, because every time I try and do something, and it happened as a child, he would swoop in, and I don't think it was malicious, but it was always, "Oh, Sam, why didn't you try it this way?" So I think my brain constantly was being wired to think whatever way I did something, there was a better way to do it, or the way I was doing it was wrong. So fast forward to today, and that, although the whole point of the whole process of social media, for example, is to just be bad at it at the beginning, because and that is just the reality of it. You're not going to be great at it straight away. You have to be a bit messy for a bit, and learn the ropes, learn the tricks of the trade, and then you start getting it. And that's just my example. Social media is just what I'm focusing on right now, but whatever.
And this is where you are right now, isn't it? Which is helping you to unravel all this. If we just go back to childhood again, what I noticed, or what I've learned, is that our patternings are picked up from our parents, and as your parent, I have picked up my patternings from my parents, and it just goes further down the line. I think we've spoken about this before. And when I was pregnant with you, I was pregnant immediately, first time round, bullseye. And then it was a very straightforward pregnancy. The due date, the 13th of October, you were actually born on the 13th of October. And in fact, Megan was born on her due date as well. When I did my training on understanding emotional patterns and the subconscious, I was told that when children that are born on their due date come in with a patterning of perfectionism.
Okay.
Because it's the belief to get it right and do it by the book. Now, if I think how I was when I was pregnant with you, I had Megan, who was a little baby. I was feeling very out of control and needing to be in control. And your dad and I, before children came along, we had everything neat and tidy, and we had a routine, and we always wanted to be the best couple and have the best house. And your dad had brought that in from his childhood. Mangi, his mum, everything is perfect, and she uses that word a lot. Oh, they're perfect. It has to be perfect.
It's perfect.
Jojo.
Yeah. What can I tell you?
And so that's just what Dad learned, and he brought it into the house, and he liked to clean, and it was very helpful. And I liked organization, and so as when you two were little, we had a routine. And we taught you to tidy up and clean the house with us. And we thought it was all very normal and very nice. I mean, it set you up to be able to run a house well, but you were brought up with order. And I also remember when you were very little, is that you were showing signs of needing things to be in order. So you used to have these little coins, didn't you? And you'd lay them out very neatly, and then you'd pick them up, and then you'd take 3 steps, and then you'd lay them down and you pick them up. And might be a little bit of autism there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that later just transpired to be very on the spectrum behavior, didn't it? I just didn't think we knew that at the time.
No.
And I think that follows on from what you're saying. Like, order is something that I really value in my life, and it's something that I'm trying to combat by letting things be a bit less ordered at times, and I wouldn't say chaotic, because I just know that I'll go into a meltdown. But when things are out of order, I can't function, because I think there's a history of Asperger's and autism in our family, and I think a lot of us, even if we're not really affected by it, I think we're on the spectrum somewhere. I definitely know that I have moments where it's more prevalent in me. It doesn't affect my day-to-day life, but it certainly is a very driving factor in who I am as a person and how I process things.
So in that need for order, in that need for everything to be right, do you think that could be influencing your perfectionism?
Yeah, I think so. And I think with the way that my brain works is I can get quite tunnel vision with things. This is the only way to do it. And that might be the difference between someone like me and someone who is less fearful of making mistakes, for example, because they might not have that tunnel vision. They're not so attached to ideas. That can be quite challenging at times when there are infinite ideas and ways to do something, and my mind gets locked onto one of them. And I find it really hard to see outside of that until somehow it's processed, and I go, oh, okay, well, maybe that isn't the only way to do it.
And so you, with that mindset, as you started to grow up, going to school and being around friends and the academic system, how do you think that was reinforced or built on?
I just think I wasn't at all understood at school, and I didn't know how I wanted to be understood, to be fair, because I was a child, and I just know that I had a real passion for something and didn't share that with anyone else around me, and no one, teacher or student, was ever supportive of what I did as a child. I remember
With your music?
with my music. Yeah, I remember when I was the first day of, talk about autistic, on the first day of my music class in year 7, because I was so passionate about music. In the first lesson, at the end of the lesson, I put my hand up and I said, "Is there any optional homework that we can take home with us?" And I didn't live that down for the next 5 years of school, because I was just excited about, like, oh, let's do it. Well, what can we do? What can I? And I think maybe also I wanted to be like, this is my dojo. Like, I'm in my music class. I want everyone to know that maybe I'm the music guy. And that backfired.
So you didn't get that support, but as you said, you didn't let anybody in. You became the one-man band, didn't you? And you really probably always have been with your music. And it was really hard for you to let people in because you built yourself up to such a high standard internally, and what appeared externally. It was hard to get anyone in that might challenge that might not either be as good as you or not on the same vibe or not get you.
Well, when I was 17, that was the biggest lesson and the biggest learning, was meeting a music manager who was a very formative period of my life, and very challenging, because my identity was not secure at all, as as most 17-year-olds is, and it was a very tumultuous period of his ego versus my ego, and I think he pushed me so hard to do things that he wanted, because he wanted to live his dream through someone else, which was me. But it was so hard, and it was like, all my power was taken away from me. I didn't really have a say in anything, and I was stuck in this contract with this guy that I hated and I resented, and I challenged everything about me. And around Christmas one year, 2 years into the contract, I managed to get out on a technicality, and then the healing began from that kind of, I would say, abusive relationship. It wasn't physically abusive, but it was lots of manipulation, lots of power plays, and it was horrible. I hated every minute of
And
that.
pushed your perfectionism, your internal belief of perfectionism off the scale, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's particularly attached to your voice that has taken years to heal.
And in that process of healing after the fact, I completely isolated myself, as you said, like one-man band for years. I wouldn't have the confidence to be in a session with anybody writing or anything. I just learned to do everything on my own. So I learned to write, I learned to produce, and then that was the main thing. Learned to mix, learned to master, and so all these songs that I eventually got to the point of releasing, which was another issue that I just couldn't get past my perfectionism enough to release music, which is, if there's any musicians listening, they'll know that that's real. A song is never finished. It can always be improved.
How many different versions of one particular song that you did?
I think,
Mum, I've got a new version. What do you think?
It was a track I released 2 years ago, and that went through about 6-7 revisions of production, and then got about 1,500 streams. So it just goes to show that, like, just put it out there. It's just not worth it. That took so much mental capacity, so much stress. It's just like doesn't matter. Until you're at a point when it does matter,
And in that isolation, all you had to bounce off was you and your barrier of where you needed to get to. And then when you were there, it was just getting higher and higher. Yeah. How do you think that affected your mental health, you being in your own bubble and pushing yourself that hard?
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Because it's when you're in that echo chamber of just your own thoughts, like you versus you have no external perspective of what is actually working for other people and how things are done normally. If your only reference is how you do something, there's no room to learn a new way of doing something which might be working better. I was trying to do social media for my music stuff, and it was never taking off, and it was never working, and it never seemed authentic because I didn't follow any other musicians on social media, because I was like, I think I built up this thing of perfectionism in my head, and it was a huge ego thing. It was about protecting myself by saying, I almost had to convince myself that I was better than other people, because that then allowed me to stay in my place of safety, meant I didn't have to. It's so weird, it doesn't actually make any sense, but I then had to, it would keep me in that place where I didn't have to release stuff, and I could just talk about how music's going, and it's not actually going anywhere.
Well, you wouldn't ever have to challenge yourself, because you'd never see the mirror back from other people. You could keep yourself safe, as you said. Yeah.
And now, on the flip side of that, now that my job as a videographer now is working with artists on creating engaging content for their social media. So it's so weird how I had no idea how to do that for myself. And now that I've taken myself out of the equation, and now I just look at another artist and go, okay, this is what I think is going to help you resonate with other people, because I can see it objectively. It's not, my ego's not in the way. And, there's lots of people that I know that I think if they were able to get out of their own way and their own ego, they would be doing much better than they are, because, we, in ourselves, the internal dialogue and the internal conversation, we believe that the way we're doing something is the best way to do it. And outside looking in, people are like, this makes absolutely no sense, and you change these one or two things and you're going to be flying. But because it doesn't agree with you in your head, you're like, I don't know, I kind of just want to do it my way. And it's like, oh, okay, but
So it was really hard for you to let people in, to be able to get that perspective, to be able to challenge your beliefs. But it's really interesting that you've almost flipped over your career to be on the other side, to be that help to everybody else. It's like, I want to be part of your team to help you to be a success, because you couldn't let anybody in to help you be the success, because you'd created too much of a vacuum. Yeah. And so this is part of your learning, really. Right now, you're exactly where you're meant to be able to see this from another perspective, that actually, to be able to help others be that success, it's almost, I imagine at some point you're going to get, well, why didn't I? I deserve that too. I deserve to be the success. And you are creating a success in this, but it's on the complete flip of where you really, really wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, the hindsight of it in the future might be like, oh, maybe I wish I had that path, but I have to trust how I feel at this moment, and right now, and I don't see this changing for the foreseeable future, is when I work with artists, I'm like, I love the visual creative side. I love being behind the camera, being able to be personable with artists and go like, let's make the best thing we can for you. Like, let's make this as easy as possible for you to tell your story as an artist, because I never had that. No one was there to actually help me do that. And
because you didn't let anybody in, but also
and it's just one of those things, nowadays with social media being everything, there is just, people won't help you until you've figured it out yourself. There's just too many people trying to do it, and social media is something that is ongoing, and you can't constantly have someone there to help you. You have to be able to do it yourself. And I think there comes a point where perfectionism is one thing, but then maybe it's asking yourself the question, am I actually doing the right thing with my life?
Which is what you're trying to work out now, is what is the difference here? What is the difference of doing the best I can be in this situation, in this moment, as opposed to perfectionism?
Yeah. But also
what
the
do you think
music
the
versus
difference
the
is?
videography is who's going first.
Sorry. What do you think the difference is
between
perfectionism and high standard? You're wanting to do your best.
Yeah, I think having the perfectionism element is really important. I think anyone who is successful and offers a really good service in something has to have that. But it's how loud that is in your brain. If that's all you hear, and it doesn't actually let you let go of anything and release anything into the world, then what's the point? Like, you may have music that's so brilliant and perfect, but if it's still not good enough in your head and you've never released it, what's the point?
So do you feel like perfectionism is like an addiction?
Yeah, because I think once you want to break out of it, you notice it all the time, and then all you can think about is like, I wish this was not here anymore. Like, I wish I could overcome this. I wish I could do without this. And I think it's that, like going sober, you have to go through some really uncomfortable moments, and I think that's what I'm trying to accomplish with my social media right now is and in my life in general. It's not just that. I think that's just a vehicle for some other change that's going on in my life, that make things, just do things even if they're not perfect.
So what tools have you come across that help you on a day-to-day basis to challenge that?
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of the things that I think would help me ultimately can make it worse. I think planning is important, but only to a certain degree. Planning can very easily tip over into procrastination or over planning, and then that's when perfectionism starts creeping in. If you start planning every single detail and you're not actually going into action, then you start questioning all your ideas and going, oh, this could be better, and then you just burn out.
So you come in your head because you're working on the minutiae here, then you're too much in your head.
In terms of tools, I don't know. I think like having influence is so important. I think like if you don't have a reference of what is working in whatever walk of life, if you don't have an influence of the way that you want something to be done in the long run, I'm sure that you listen to podcasts where you think like, I'm going to model my podcast around that until it, into my own thing. And that's what I lacked when I was making music. I
remember when you were a teenager, your influence was Michael Bublé. He was your goal. I want to be him. I want to move to America.
That was obsession, though.
And then it went to 1975, the band, didn't it? Those two people emulated the perfection for you. They were your driver.
I couldn't get my head around, they're two quite divisive artists, and some people love them and some people just can't stand them. But when I get latched onto something, I'm like, I cannot comprehend how you are that good. The 1975 was probably one of my biggest learnings, and has been with my creativity for the longest amount of time, I think, because when their first album dropped in 2013, that changed everything for me, and I was like, I want to learn to do whatever it is they're doing. So I learned how to produce like them and created all these like crazy tracks of like really intricate productions and stuff, and it became way more about that and like hiding behind the production than it did about me being an artist. And nowadays, like I don't make music anymore. Maybe one day I'll do it again, just for me, but not for the success of it. But I see them, like performing big festivals and big shows and stuff, and I still feel it in my chest, where I'm like, that is just a level of accomplishment that I would have loved to have had, but it's just not. It's not going to happen for me. It's not my path. I think that everything that comes with being a really massive touring artist would just destroy me as a person. It's every day is not ordered. There's no routine. You're in a different place every day, out late every single night. There's lots of alcohol, lots of, I don't do drugs, but that you're around that all the time. And I've just get, really, really low.
Yeah. And that's one of the negative effects for you is in order to stay perfect, keeps you well, keeps your mood in balance. And that was been really hard to balance that, hasn't it? So in what you've learnt over the years and learnt about yourself, where are you putting yourself? What have you learnt that is working for you now?
Working with people was always told to me is the most important thing. Collaboration and learning from other people was always the most important thing, but I could never see it that way. I always just thought my way is the best way. And then I moved to London from Spain, where I was isolated, and I was able to think like that. I moved to London, and that is when everything changed, because I was like, everyone here knows each other. Everyone learns from each other in this music circle. In that moment, I realized everything I know is wrong. Everything I think I know isn't how things work. And in that moment was when I realized maybe this isn't actually what I want to do.
Your tower crumbled to the floor, didn't it? And everything, the foundations just needed to be rebuilt. And from there, you have been rebuilding and going from strength to strength. But it was a painful time, wasn't it? Deconstructing that ego and that belief system.
Well, it's sad when you come to a conclusion that what you thought was your life path isn't. It might not be the right thing for you, and it took about a year to fully accept it. But through therapy and through just taking a break, what is it? Is it Jim Carrey said? Depressed is actually just deep rest. Like, you just need to be completely like go into that rest state of whatever it is that's bringing you down, is just to be away from that. And I think that from the quantity of gigs and the intensity of the gigs I was doing in Spain, to come to London and to just all of that stop, was being in that space of being able to sit with the feeling, and that was rock bottom for me. The amount of times I just called you just crying because I didn't even know why I was crying. I was just so low that
you had to face yourself then, didn't you? By being busy, by being so motivated, stopped you from looking at yourself, and you had to, which was the best thing for you.
Yeah.
And
but
if
it birthed into something new, and that's, I just think at 26 at the time, I think so many people at that age are so terrified to try something new, and you think that you need to be on the right path by then. And I'm not trying to preach, but I think I've realized that your 20s really don't matter that much. And I'm still in my 20s, but it really doesn't matter. Most people who are successful are in their 30s onwards, and you're still figuring stuff out. And I feel like now I'm on the right path, but it's just, if it happens that way, then just go with it, because it's not worth staying in something that doesn't make you happy.
Well, your 20s are a build up to getting you on the path, aren't they? And you're hitting your path now. So to close it all off, is what advice or golden nuggets would you offer to someone who's dealing with perfectionism to be able to challenge it? What would you offer?
I would say step away from it for a while. I mean, sometimes that's not possible, but if you do have the time and the resources to step away from something and just see it a bit clearer, I would definitely suggest that. And ultimately, it depends where you are along the journey of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. If you haven't started yet, I would just say, like, make it a game to make mistakes. Like, make it unserious, make it intentional to just go and be like, I know this isn't going to be perfect, but I have to go through this phase of messiness to get to there, to get further on. But I know if someone said that to me 5 years ago, I would have been like, okay, cheers for the advice, but I'm just going to carry on the way that I'm going. Thanks. So you just got to get there yourself.
And also life gave you the lesson, didn't it? The move from Spain to London and not being able to get any work. The universe gave you what you needed in order to make that shift. So sometimes we get an extra help too, don't we? So there's not a one thing only here. There's lots of ways to be able to break this down. And if you're intentional about finding yourself, you will find the ways. You will find the tools. But it
doesn't matter what you do, so long as you're doing something.
Exactly. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You always do what you've always done. You'll always get what you've always got. Anyway, thank you very much, Sam. I really do love doing podcasts with you, because you just take the floor and feed all the information out there. So, and I'm full of admiration for you. I always have been. How you consistently challenge yourself and sit with those uncomfortable feelings, and you have an incredible insight for someone of your age. And as a male, it's a pleasure watching you grow, even through the painful times. But thank you very much for joining me again. For those guests who like listening to Sam and his musings, you can go back to episodes 1 and 2, where Sam and I chat about childhood, and he throws the book at me. But always a pleasure, Sam.
Always a pleasure, Mother. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah. We'll catch you again on episode 4. Okay. Take care, Sam. Thank you.
Bye.